Right, we're still in Advent, so what I speak about this morning has got to be something to do with the birth of Jesus. So Mary and Joseph travelled to Bethlehem to be counted, and where Mary was destined to give birth to her promised son Jesus. We know it had to be Bethlehem, where Mary gave birth, to fulfil the prophecy. I have been thinking quite a lot about Mary recently, so that's the person I'm going to speak about this morning. Because the Catholic Church have exalted Mary to a position equal to Jesus, which was not scriptural, not part of God's plan, something Mary did not strive for or even think about, I think some Protestant churches shy away from speaking about her, and I can see the reasons behind it. But as I said, poor Mary did not plan or want to become an icon, did not want to be seen as equal to her son. I've heard the Catholic Church feel that as a woman, she's more compassionate than Jesus with him being a man. So they go to her and she goes to Jesus on their behalf. A lot of high churches as well as Catholic churches have statues of her. But no person that ever walked this earth is anywhere near as compassionate to us as Jesus is. We know that we can go directly to him who then intercedes for us. But Mary has a story to tell. She's the woman that was handpicked out by God to be a big part of his plan for our redemption. He chose the time when she was alive and chose her to begin to carry out his great works for us. He entrusted Mary to be the woman who would carry his son in her womb. I say a woman, but she was no more than a young adolescent. As we all know, she was engaged to Joseph, but they had never done anything to bring about a pregnancy. Although she had been told by the angel that the baby was going to be the Son of God, she showed great faith, trust and bravery in going along with this. Joseph would assume she had been unfaithful to him. What would he do? If he brought this out into the open and discarded her, she had a good chance of being stoned to death, as this is what happened in those times. But we know an angel appeared to Joseph to explain to him. But did she know this was going to happen? She just had to trust God. After Jesus was born, they took him to the temple, as was the practice then, and they met Simeon, the man that God had promised would not die until he had seen the Messiah. In Luke, we read what Simeon says to Mary. He prophesied over her, and in this prophecy were these words. He told Mary that a painful sword will one day pierce her inner being. Your child will be laid down as a miracle sign for the downfall and resurrection of many in Israel. What was this awful thing that would happen to a little boy that would pierce her inner being like a sword? How often she would have thought on these words as she brought him up, comforting him when he was upset, mending Gray's knees and such. We mothers all know how much we worry about our children being hurt. It is said that parents would rather suffer all the bad things that happen to their children themselves rather than see them suffer. I have heard this called parental pain. But Mary knew Jesus was born for what was to happen to him. She knew he was God's son, but he was also hers. But Mary did what God had asked her to do. Even with all this in her heart, she brought Jesus up to do what she knew he had to do. We also know that at the wedding feast in Cana, Jesus performed his first miracle, turning the water into wine, because his mother asked him to, even though he said his time had not yet come. He was being a son to her just as she was being his mother. We also know that she was at the cross when he died, and she must have been there when he was beaten by the Roman soldiers. But I bet she had to turn her face away from it all, if she could see anything at all through her tears. It must have broken her heart as a mother to watch her son go through this. I bet she felt every blow the soldiers inflicted on him. Mary, his mother, was very important to Jesus. He loved her like a son does love his mother. As he was dying, he uttered the 7 sentences from the cross in all his pain. He turned to Mary and told her, "Woman, behold your son." And turning to the disciple John, he told him, "Behold your mother." And we are told that John took Mary to his own house, and he did become her son. It was a real mother and son relationship that Jesus and Mary had. He was concerned about his mother and wanted to make sure she was going to be looked after when he had gone. So I think Mary was a great figure in the Bible, not a type of God herself, as she has been denoted by the Catholic Church, just a person like so many other people we read about that were greatly used by God. I can learn a lot from Mary, her faithfulness, bravery and obedience to God, even in such heartache. We're going to play a song in a minute, and most of us have heard it. It's Mary, Did You Know? But I think there should be a verse asking Mary if she knew about all the heartache was in store for her. But just like us, Jesus redeemed Mary for God. And thankfully she knew, just like we do, that he rose from the dead and went back to his Father in heaven. So she would have known that she was right to trust God to finish what he had begun. Mary is not equal to Jesus, but I think Mary has earned her crown in heaven.
Well, I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to follow that, to be honest. I'm glad I'm now not singing and just talking. But I'm not sure about you, but I feel like we've been preparing for Christmas for absolutely ages. Ages and ages. Now, when you work in a school, Christmas starts way back in September. You get back after your lovely summer holiday, and first question is, so what are we doing for the nativity this year? What songs should we sing at church? Who's going to make the props for the nativity? And Christmas starts straight away in September. And anyone who's ever worked in a primary school or even in a Sunday school will be so familiar with spending weeks and weeks and weeks practicing that long-awaited nativity. I can see some people nodding at me. It's hard work, I'm telling you, especially with reception when they're 4. But there we go. And you practice and you practice and you practice and you think you've got it to perfection. And then on the day, something always goes disastrously wrong. Baby Jesus' head falls off. Yeah, I've seen that happen. And then rolls across the stage. The donkey wets themselves because they didn't go to the toilet before they got on the stage, even though you said to them 50 billion times, does anybody need to go to the toilet? There's always an accident. The wise men refuse to give up their gifts to Jesus because they want to keep them for themselves, even though they're just empty boxes. Or the wise men get really confused with their words and they give Jesus gold, Frankenstein and myrrh instead of frankincense. And you know, I don't think the parents notice, and the parents think it's really cute. But for teachers and people who've worked so hard, it's absolutely soul-destroying when something goes wrong. Now, many, many years ago, when I first started teaching, it was a long time ago now, my grandparents bought me a book, and it's by someone called Gervais Finn. And this is the book here. Now, Gervais Finn was a teacher, and in this book, he recalls his favourite nativity disasters. So I'm just going to read you a really short one that really made me smile. Now, I don't think Gervais Finn was from the Black Country. I think he was from Yorkshire. But if we imagine this in a Black Country accent, it is quite funny. So here we go. This is called A Very Special Time of Year. Are you sitting comfortably? Okay. December sunshine, bright and brittle, shone through the classroom window and lit up the vicar. His sparse, sandy hair shone like gold, and his small black eyes sparkled. His cheeks shone as if they'd recently been scrubbed. "This is a very special time of year, children," he said jovially, addressing the infants who stared up at him with open mouths. "Can anybody tell me what time of year it is?" "Christmas," volunteered a small boy with a feathery fringe who began waving his hand in the air like a daffodil in strong wind. "It's Christmas! It's Christmas!" "It is indeed," agreed the vicar, smiling. "It's Christmas, and it's a very, very special time of year." "Well, I'm getting a bike," one boy shouted. "I'm getting a doll, and she can wet her nappy, and she talks," added another girl, her hair in untidy bunches. This was the signal for every child in the class to shout out what presents they were hoping to get from Father Christmas. I'm getting a remote control car. Well, I'm getting a train set. I'm getting a... Children, 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 exclaimed the vicar, raising his hand like a crossing patrol warden stopping the cars. Christmas is not just about presents, you know. It's really a celebration of a birthday. It's about the birth of a very special baby. I know what the baby was called, said the small wiry boy. The vicar interlaced his long fingers beneath his chin in an attitude like a child praying, and smiled. I am very glad to hear that, he said, in a kindly tone often possessed by men of the cloth. The baby was called Wayne, said the child. Wayne? Certainly not. What a horrifying thought, cried the vicar in horror. But it was, the boy said. The baby was called Wayne. No, it wasn't called Wayne, said the vicar. His jaw was now tightening and his voice was quavering a little bit. He bit his lip momentarily. The poor man had imagined that speaking to a group of small children about Christmas would be an easy task, and now he was regretting that he'd ever agreed to visit the school at all. The baby was called Jesus, said the vicar. Jesus. It was definitely Wayne, persisted the child. Jesus, said the vicar. Wayne, said the child. I know this because we've been singing all about it for our nativity. A Wayne in a manger, no crib for a bed. And it's that story that gives the book its title, A Wayne in a Manger. So that's one of my favourite stories that I've ever received at Christmas. But a few weeks ago, I was leading collective worship at school. And we were due to start thinking about Advent. Now at school we have symbols for the big concepts of Christianity. So we've got a symbol for creation, a symbol for the fall, a symbol for salvation. The children are really familiar with them and we use them all the time to teach our RE lessons. So feeling quite confident, I displayed the symbol for incarnation. And I'd got 300, maybe 400 children in collective worship. And I said, children, who can tell me what this symbol represents? And you've got the children who were like bursting on the floor. So one of the children who'd confidently got their hand up, I thought, I can't go wrong with this. Let's go for it. They said, that's easy, Mrs. Plant. That's reincarnation. So straight away, I did what the vicar did, thanking my lucky stars that our vicar wasn't at school that day. And I launched into correcting the child and explaining that no, it wasn't reincarnation, because reincarnation is Hinduism and we're thinking about Christianity. And the symbol is in fact incarnation, which means God made flesh and sent to earth in human form, and that the form is called Jesus. Because, of course, we're a church school, so I couldn't let this misconception go by. That would not be good. The child shouted up in collective worship in front of all the other children and said, but Mrs. Plant, reincarnation means rebirth, and Jesus was born so that we could be born again. How interesting. Now, around the same time that this happened, I'd started listening to my Christmas worship playlist on Spotify. I don't know how many of you use Spotify. There are other music streaming platforms out there, I should say, before I get told off for the recording. But I absolutely refuse to pay for Spotify Premium. So this comes with a consequence. I don't know whether you're familiar with this, but it comes with the consequence of getting adverts. So every 2 or 3 songs you get an advert. Also, if your playlist isn't long enough, they chuck random songs onto your playlist for you that are sort of like linked to the theme of your playlist. And you can't skip them all because you can only skip 5 times a day. So maybe I should just pay for premium, I don't know. But one morning I was getting ready for work and we'd had this collective worship just a couple of days beforehand, and this was still going round in my head, this comment that this child had made. And one morning a new song appeared on my playlist. I'd already skipped my 5 songs, and so I was forced to listen to this song. And it's called God Made a Way by an artist called Brandon Heath. Now, these are some of the lyrics. That night when Jesus was born 2,000 years ago, God made a way in a manger. In that little town of Bethlehem, where God made a way in a manger. In his infinite love, it had to be done. He did the impossible and gave up his son, Jesus. God made a way in a manger. There was no other way, a way in a manger. And you know, it's amazing how even in parts of the Bible that we've heard and read so many times, I've done 34 Christmases. I have heard this part of the Bible time and time again, but God can reveal something new. So this song and the words that the child said during collective worship have really made me reflect and think about the Christmas story from a different perspective this year. In John chapter 14 and verse 6, the Bible literally says, Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. But I often find myself falling into the thinking that Jesus shows us the way. Jesus shows us the way we should behave, the way we should think, the way we should react to different things. Jesus shows us the way to follow when we want to become a child of God, and then the way to follow when we do become a child of God. But actually, Jesus was the way. Amen. We often remember Easter as being the time of year when the way was created, because Jesus made the way for us to be saved by dying on the cross. But I think we've got our thinking all the wrong way round, because actually the way was made when God came to earth in human form and Jesus was born. That night, the night when Jesus was born, everything changed. The way was made. And in the words of a 9-year-old who shouted out in collective worship, Jesus was born so that we could be born again. We often say Jesus died so that we could be born again, but no, Jesus was born. Yes, I know he had to die, but Jesus was born specifically for that reason. We can be so quick, can't we, to correct children and often to dismiss what they've got to say. But in the Bible, Jesus had the complete opposite mindset, and he encouraged children to come and spend time with him. And in the Gospel of Mark, in chapter 10, it says this: people were bringing little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them, but the disciples rebuked them. And when Jesus saw this, he was indignant. He said to them, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them. The kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." He took the children in his arms, placed his hands on them, and blessed them. And you know, Jesus teaches us that we should be more like the little children. Sometimes as adults, we think that we hold all the knowledge and all the understanding, and that it's our job to impart that upon the next generation. But actually, if we spend more time listening this Christmas, I wonder what insights we would gain into the Christmas story from their point of view. So this Christmas, when you sing Away in a Manger, I'm sure you'll remember the story of Wayne, the Wayne in the manger. But also remember that on that night, God made the way. There was no other way but the way that God made in the manger.
This morning, I'd like to share some thoughts on a character from A Christmas Story, a bit like I did last year. My one and only time at the front on a Sunday morning. So, and while you're all scrambling to think before she asks me what did she talk about, it was the wise men. So I've chosen another character this morning. As Laura's mentioned, I also work in a school. We've had nativity. It's done, gone, thank goodness. Sends the staff mad, but everybody else enjoys it, so that's okay. So my question to you this morning is, can you remember a role you have played in a nativity? Here's mine. Hopefully. This is a Sunday school nativity, not a school one. I was 4 years old on that picture. We're not talking about how old I am in a few next week, so that's fine. I don't remember doing this at all, but I know I can see this picture in my head. And I was like, right, I'm going to share that. So I'm talking about this morning the angels. I was going to read quite a few Bible things, but we are running out of time. So the angels are involved in a lot of the Christmas story. We read about them visiting Mary. One visited Joseph in a dream, and they were also sent to visit the shepherds too. And in the Greek, angel means messenger. And this is what the angels were sent to do: bring messages from God to people on earth. And in the Christmas story, I think the angels were sent to give those messages because it was an important message. And it was an important message that needed to be believed. Many prophecies had already been given about the birth of the Messiah. But this time it was actually happening. So it needed something heavenly to confirm its importance. And I've put the word realness, I'm not sure that's an actual word, but the realness, it was happening and needed to be believed. And there are two things that we can take from the angel's part in the birth of Jesus. And the first one, you might have to skip to this bit, Sam, is do not be afraid. There we go. With Mary and the shepherds, the angels tell them, do not be afraid. It's one of the first few things they say. And I think the angel understood that just appearing there in front of them would be startling. And also their appearance, what they look like, would cause a bit of a scare for them. But they also knew that they meant no harm and were bringing good news. So they knew that the people they were talking to didn't need to be afraid. And this message can be for us today too. Do not be afraid, which is easy to stand here and say, but not always easy to put into practice. There are so many things going on in all our lives that cause us to worry or to be scared, but we can know that God is with us and working in those situations. We can pray and leave them in his hands. And there are many verses in the Bible that tell us not to be afraid. Psalm 46, verse 1 says, God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. Psalm 34 says, I sought the Lord and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. And I have a little book that I write down things to pray for. I got it from the Works a few years ago, and it's got lots of Bible verses as you go through. And I got to this one, and I didn't realise it was actually a Bible verse. But I sing that song in my head a lot. I sought the Lord and he heard and he answered, the I Trust in God song. And I sing that to myself when I've prayed about something and I am still mithering and worrying about it. And I'm like, I have to sing that. And I sing it quite a lot in my head. But it's reminding us that we can trust in God and not be afraid. Isaiah 41 verse 10 says, so do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. In Joshua, it says, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And Deuteronomy 31 says, the Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. God is with us and we do not need to be afraid. He will get us through whatever comes today, tomorrow, and on into the future. And the second thing that we can take from the angels is to share the good news. I thought Phil was going to steal my thunder earlier. When appearing to the shepherds, the angel tells them they have come to tell them good news, that the Messiah has been born. And when visiting, there is first one angel, but then there is a host of them. And as they share their news, they start praising God. And just imagine that sound. It's always that line in O Holy Night, hear the angel voices. And Carol was encouraging us last week to think about our worship and how we can share that in all we do. Can we tell people about Jesus this Christmas and as we go into the next year? And in Matthew chapter 4, it says, Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness among the people. And Jesus is always one of the best examples to follow. He himself went around telling people good news. So why do we need to share that good news? Everybody likes to hear good news. But it also gives people hope. And in 1 Peter 3 it says, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. but do this with gentleness and respect. Sharing the good news of Jesus can give people hope that they need at a time, and then it's also there for those times after and in the future when they get back into those troubles. Are we willing to go and tell and do what God asks of us like the angels? They had probably been waiting a lot more patiently than we would to go and give this message to earth. Can we be ready to share the good news? And as the song says, go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. These are two things I have to work on and I'm working on. So remember, the angels tell us, do not be afraid and share good news. Thank you very much.